Okay, we have recording in progress. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am so glad you're here. This opportunity came to me and I just had to share it with you. So, those of you who want to change careers from special education, from speech language pathology, from specialists, and you're looking for another pathway, I want you to spend this next 30 minutes luxuriating in this possibility. Okay. So the problem is what you've been led here for is because typically you're overworked, you're near burnout, or maybe you're just bored, you're ready for something else and you don't want to go back to school, you don't want to get into a completely separate job with boat insurance, you know, you don't want to start over and you feel like your choices are very limited right now. And I'm really grateful that Sean and I connected because through a conversation that we had, I realized that there's a fourth option, right? You're not going back to school. You're not just staying in a classroom. You're not starting completely over. This fourth option that Sean is going to share with you, which blew my mind because he already has the structure for it, allows you to use the skills you already have. It allows you to continue working with the people you already know how to work very well with. And if you do it well, it will pay you more, most likely, than what you're earning right now, and will give you some flexibility with your life. So I'm going to turn this over to Sean, and he's going to share the system that he has built for executive function coaching behavior. It has to do with student access, essentially helping people live their best lives on your own terms. So I'm not really going to go into more than that because Sean, you're the expert. So I invite you to share everything about what you've built, give yourself your introduction. So Sean, I hope I've done you justice.
You have.
Over
No,
to you.
fantastic. Well, Steph, first off, thank you. I appreciate you. And it honestly was like maybe 6 months ago or less where I've coached and trained so many people over the past like 4 years since I started my certification. And it was like this light bulb moment. I was like, everybody here is a teacher, and
Right.
like almost 99% of the people who come through are either a special ed teacher, or, there's a little fraction of like speech language pathologists and counselors. And I was like, I've never done anything to reach out to teachers, because I've just been advertising, here's how to become an executive function coach, through my writing and stuff. And so I was like, well, where do teachers hang out? I was like, I could go on LinkedIn. And so I started just like looking on LinkedIn and found your stuff. You create so much value. You're so present and available and supportive of transitioning teachers. And so I'm so grateful right now that you saw this as like an option, because I think a lot of people don't realize that, yeah, sometimes you don't have to go back to school because you have what I call an unfair advantage.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to just quickly share my screen. This is like a worksheet I made for this. I want to make sure everyone can access it. So let me just make sure. Oops. Okay. Anyone with the link can view it. I'm going to copy that and drop it in the chat box just so you can look at this later if you want. But let's just go through a couple things for you to think about. So the first thing is your value. And I think the big challenge as you're leaving education or you're thinking about transitioning, and I'm like getting so excited here, I'm gonna take my sweater off. We're getting
And
into it.
and don't forget to tell people your background, where
Yes,
you
I'm
came
sorry.
from.
Thank you.
And
Yeah, I
I know it's
let
30
me
sec
start
or
there.
it's 30 minutes and I know we're so pumped to get to the point, but Sean here
Yes.
has the utmost integrity and credibility because he was literally in the position that you're in
Yes.
right now.
Do we have any special educators in here right now?
Ton of special
Okay,
educators in here,
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, like drop
Mhm.
in the chat. What role are you working if you're in the schools or outside of it? So I'll just share real quick. So I I've always been in education. When I was 18, instead of going to college, I joined this thing called City Year. I worked in public schools in New York City for a year, volunteering. I went to school and then joined Teach for America after college, and worked in Buffalo. Got my master's in special education at SUNY Buffalo. Go Bengals! And then moved across the United States back to where I grew up, which is the Bay Area in California, and became a public school special education teacher and ran what's called a counseling enriched classroom. So it was a classroom for kids coming back from residential treatment, ages, freshman in high school through senior, very challenging kids, who are in residential, all in one classroom, and it was me, a teacher aide, and a counselor in there. And I found that I could help all these, like at first it was like chaos. I was like, what am I doing? They just built this classroom. It was like the hardest thing ever. Kids were running out of the room at times. It was like over time, I learned that the only way to help really challenge students is that they have to feel completely bought in. Like they have to see the end line and feel like you can help them take steps forward each day. And as I did that year after year, I realized that these skills weren't like knowing math or knowing how to be the best writer. It was executive function skills. It was like, can you help a student identify a goal and make progress towards it? And can you do that consistently? So I'm seeing some people here like special ed coordinator, gifted and talented teacher. I imagine that's what you're figuring out how to do with your students. And so after 4 years of doing that, my wife and I had our first child. And I was hoping I could stay in my district, but they wouldn't let me stay without switching schools because I wanted to go down to 1 day less a week. And I was like, I just built this classroom, like I created the whole culture in here, and now I have to leave. And so it's kind of that like moment for me where I was like, I think I need to go out on my own and like see how the world values me because I'm not feeling valued by my district. Like I'm feeling like they were telling me that my classroom was saving the district 500,000 to $1 million a year because they weren't paying residential fees for these students because they were all in my classroom. And I was like, so then why can't you be flexible with me if the value I'm bringing is
Hmm.
that intense? So I decided to like start what I thought was tutoring. But the more students I got, the more people said, "Oh, Sean helps with executive functioning." And my main referral source, which I'll teach you in a little bit, the people who kept referring to me were neuropsychologists who were doing assessments of students and they were like, "Hey, this guy can really help your kid who struggles with ADHD or autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia. He can help them get on track." Because I had that what I call the unfair advantage of being a special ed teacher. You know how to take really challenging concepts and break them down into small bite-sized chunks and nurture students towards that. And so I didn't realize that at the time. I was like, oh, I guess I'll just tutor. But the skill that I was teaching was executive function coaching. I was helping them identify their goals and create a pathway to it. And so that's been after a year of coaching students, like I had more clients than I could work on by myself. So I started hiring other teachers. And then I needed a systematic way to train those teachers. So I started this course called the Executive Function Coaching Certification to train my team members. I looked at my website, and the page that got the most visits wasn't my coaching page. It was how do I become an executive function coach? And it quickly became the number one search result on Google for that query. How to become an executive function coach was my page. I didn't intentionally do this. I just was trying to attract more team members and walk them through the steps. And so that was 4 years ago. Since then, I have trained hundreds of coaches. My business, we're 5 years in, it's still running strong. And I live a life that I could not have possibly imagined when I was in the classroom. Like I
And
work from
nobody's
home.
trying to get you to force you to change schools every five
Yeah, no.
seconds and stress
Yeah.
you out. Yeah,
I definitely have challenges. Like life is hard no matter what you're doing.
of
However,
course.
the challenges I face now are so much different. I mean, and it's all like I remember being there and they'd have the superintendent walking through my classroom being like, "This is changing our district." And I was making way less than the teacher who was in the supply closet because he wasn't allowed to be around students because he said something important or something inappropriate. And it just made me
Uh-oh.
realize like the system is not geared to support innovation or merit. It's more just like it's a conveyor belt. You hit a certain point and then they try to buy you out to
Yeah.
replace you with a younger teacher or whatever it might be. So for me, I was like, okay, I love teaching, I love helping, but I need to be in an environment that rewards creativity and care and skill and not one that stifles it. And that's why I'm here. I want to invite you to consider this as an option for taking your expertise as a gifted and talented teacher or a school psychologist, and think about how you might apply that to helping people who really need your help, right? There's so many parents out there, ADHD, I think it's like 14% of kids are diagnosed with ADHD. And one of the primary challenges with ADHD is executive dysfunction. It's an inability to focus on one thing and follow through. Same thing with autism. Oftentimes, students with autism, like they really hyper focus on something smaller when there's a bigger picture that they need to be actively moving towards. So I want to help you think about how your expertise can be applied to create a ton of value for those students and families and also in your own life. So you can have more flexibility, work from home. Most coaches I train work online. So that's why we're here today. Do we hit on it?
I have a question
Yes,
for
yes.
you.
Yeah.
Do they need to go full time and start their own businesses because it's kind of a scary thing? Can they do it part time? Can they work up to it? Give us an idea of what the pathway to entry might look like.
Yeah. So that's all. Thank you. That's a great question. So that's the beautiful thing about this is that I just started seeing kids after school, right? I was like, I had no idea how I could turn this into a career. So there was no like, I'll just drop everything. Plus, I needed, my healthcare and all that
Mhm.
stuff. So the amazing thing is you can just start to work with one student and test this. And the way that you do that is a couple of steps. So the first step is you write out your value proposition. And I'm going to show you this so you can see how to do it. So on this worksheet I dropped in, I wrote down tap into your unfair advantage. So if you click on this,
Which, by the
um,
way, everyone, this is in the chat. Those of you who arrived after Sean dropped it in, I'm going to re-drop it in for you so that you can access it.
perfect. Yeah. So here's a little breakdown of it so you understand it. But the mistake most people make here is they do what I did, which is they call yourself a tutor. But who here has a master's degree? Or who here has taught 5 or more years in the classroom, right? So many of you are not like a tutor. A high school student can call themselves a tutor. So what I'll walk you through in this article is first you identify like where do you really have a lot of knowledge. So some person put, I'm a school psychologist. So a school psychologist, you know how to assess learning differences. You know how to, make recommendations, create a plan. I'm sure many of this, you as a school psychologist, you've also probably put into practice some of those recommendations and guided students through really challenging, navigating transitions or choosing classes that are a best fit for them. So that's your unfair advantage. And then you want to think about and understanding your client pain points. That's basically just like who out there is struggling with this. So if you go on any parent Facebook group, there's like a bunch of them. Like you Google or you go into Facebook and search executive function parent. You could find a bunch of groups where you could see parents being like, why won't my kid do their missing assignments? Why won't they talk to their teachers? All those things. And so what you do is you draft a value proposition. Okay. And so I actually have a template for that in here. Right here, it's the next one. And the value proposition, and I have a little video on it too if you prefer to watch. It's really simple, right? It's your business. So I'm just gonna go with someone we got here. So Jillian Bella, executive function coaching, helps high school students, right? Or you could niche down even further. You could say high school girls overcome, missing assignments, feeling overwhelmed, avoiding schoolwork by teaching them how to effectively use a planning system so they feel empowered and motivated, right? And I will say this, it is amazing how just a little tweak, like teaching a kid how to like navigate Google Classroom or use Canvas or Schoology, and like I teach people to use what I call a digital planner. It's like just put everything on one sheet, right? When it's due in a column for has this been turned in. Like most kids just don't even have any type of system. So literally all you have to do is get them 10% ahead of where they're at, which is usually like I'm confused because teachers don't often teach organization, they teach content. Right now, I know there's some teachers in here who probably do teach organization, but that's not always the case, right? So you write that out. Okay. And there's actually a worksheet here that you can download if you want to write it out. And then the next step is you go and reach out to neuropsychologists. So this is like the craziest thing that most people don't use, but like there's so many neuropsychologists out there. You could literally use ChatGPT and just say like, I'm a parent struggling with executive function challenges. Find me 100 neuropsychologists within 100 miles of Daytona or wherever you are, or, Texas, wherever it is. Find me 100 neuropsychologists and their contact information and, list it out so I can email all of them. Right. So like that, it'll find that for you quickly. And then what you do is I have a little example email here for you. So I think I put it all together. So you put something like this. Hi, Dr. Gray. I noticed on your website you provide comprehensive evaluation services for children with ADHD and autism, right? The mistake people make is like they send, hey, I'm starting a business, check me out. That's not offering value, right? Then you say something like this. I'm creating an article on my website to list out local neuropsychologists who support students with ADHD for the families and education community I serve, right? Now, then you could say something like, Now, you may not be certified right now, but that's okay. You could say, as a former special education teacher or as a current special education teacher, I guide my clients to reduce missing assignments, improve their communication with teachers, and manage time more effectively, right? I believe I have clients who would benefit from knowing about your services, but I want to learn a little bit more about your approach so I can make a targeted recommendation. Can we meet for 15 minutes sometime within the next 2 weeks so I can learn more about your practice and how I might refer clients to you, right? Once they meet you and they see you're a authentic human that wants to help kids with special needs, like I've had neuropsychologists send me like 40 to 50 clients over a span of 3 years, probably more. I actually made a breakdown of like where I've gotten all my clients because I took it so I could show it to you. But these neuropsychologists and special education attorneys, they've sent me, hundreds of clients. So I know I'm throwing a lot at y'all here. Should I pause for a second, see if there's any questions or?
Sure. There aren't any in the chat so far. If you
Okay.
do have a question, and we didn't mention this in the beginning, I think we kind of in a Zoom post-COVID culture, we kind of take for granted that the assumption is, if you have questions, put it in the parking lot. Go ahead and throw it in our, right? Throw it in our chat. So please, if you have questions that we won't be able to answer in 30 minutes, like we want to make sure we capture it so that Sean and I are able to address them in that chat feature, in the discussion feature on LinkedIn. So please ask us your questions. I have a question for you that I know
Yeah.
it's very likely on people's mind is this something that can actually take off and replace their current salary?
100%. I mean, I'll use me as an example, but then I'll also talk about some of the people I've worked with. So for me, and I'm just gonna be honest here to be helpful. So, like most coaches, I surveyed people who graduated my program, and most of them are charging between 125 and 175. And there's outliers. Some people are charging 200 plus an hour. Some people are charging less, but most people are charging around 150. So, for me, I started, I think, at like $75, and then I moved to 90, and then I went to like 150, then 175. And when I was working individually, I think I ended up at like 250 or 275 before I just started hiring coaches. And now
Mhm.
my business charges around $185 an hour. But I retired or resigned from my teaching job. I got my first client in February 2020, and I resigned in basically December 2020. So like
Okay.
basically 8 months later, because my business was making like $20,000 or more every month,
Wow.
from this. So now, but you could say, oh, well, you're just an exception or whatever. But like I'm working with a lot of people have done this that I've coached, and I'm working with one lady. We actually looked at her numbers in detail recently. She's a former school psychologist or BCBA. She might also done something with school. She's a BCBA, works with schools, and she was charging like $200 a session. And I usually say session because what you can do is you can be like a session is a 45-minute direct coaching and then 15 minutes of follow up based on the family's preferences. That gives you a little wiggle room so that you can do like back-to-back meetings without
Cool.
squishing them together. But we looked at her numbers, and every client she had worked with, she was doing like $200 a session. She had made like $3,000 per client when we were, like maybe 6 months, 6 to 8 months after we had started the process of her starting coaching. And so the average of her clients was about $3,000 per client at that point. And so we looked at how much outreach she had done. She had reached out to 50 neuropsychologists and college consultants. So, and she had, I think, 5 clients that she was making $3,000 from each. So that's like basically what we concluded from that is that if she only did ten outreach emails, she would get one client that would net her about $3,000. So just kind of like keep that in mind, right? Like, you have 5 clients, you're making, let's just imagine out. Let's just say it's $100, right? A session to keep it even smaller. But
Mhm.
if you end up getting 10 clients eventually within 6 months, and you're charging $100 a session, you're doing 10 sessions a week, that's $1,000 a week times four. That's $4,000 a
Mhm.
month, right? And that's, I would say, at the lower rate. And a lot of coaches are working probably with 15 to 20 clients, or they're doing 15 to 20 sessions because maybe some of their clients they're doing 2 sessions a week.
Mhm.
So I definitely think that, I mean, everybody is in a different place financially in terms of how much they're making from their school district. I always tell people like reverse engineer it. So like, okay, if you want to make $10,000 a month, through your coaching, then you could think about like, okay, well, how many sessions per week would I have to do and what would I have to charge? And then you kind of start from there rather than like hoping you'll hit some magical number.
Okay. And that's an outstanding response. And I'm sure once people decide to dive into more of the links that you've shared,
Yeah.
and now I want everyone to connect with you on LinkedIn as well, and connect with you directly and reach out to ask their specific questions to you in private as well. The question that I know again is on a lot of people's minds is, will they be able to continue working with many of the students they work with now, where maybe their parents or guardians can't pay $3,000
Mhm.
net? There are programs and services that would enable parents of maybe, some of the not wealthiest districts, right? Some of the lower socioeconomic districts, because all of the people I work with, transitioning teachers specifically, get into this not for the money. They really get into the career overall for
Mhm.
making a real difference, especially going to bat for those who don't have as many resources as the more quote unquote privileged. What would you say about attracting those kinds of clients that maybe don't have thousands and thousands of dollars to spend?
Yeah. So a couple of things on that. So the first thing I say to that is that if you like ultimately this is work, right? And like you have to work to make a living unless
Mhm.
you have a trust fund or something.
Right.
So this is a job. So you have to treat it like a job, meaning you can't just give away your expertise for free. However, like if you charge more for the people who can afford it, then you can be flexible with the people who can't. So for
Hmm.
example, what I tell people is like, hey, instead of devaluing yourself up front, why don't you charge the normal rate, right? Like most coaches are charging between 150 and $200 per session. And then if someone's like, I really want it, but I can't afford it, then you can say, well, what works for you? And you can choose to be flexible with those clients who can't pay it because you're valuing yourself effectively for the people who can. I also would tell people don't assume people can't pay for things like there are cases where people can't, but like why just don't always assume that someone can't afford it.
Mhm.
Like most coaches are trained to devalue themselves. They're like, oh, I should give it away for free.
Most educators
Yes, for
are
sure.
unintentional. I mean, you were in the classroom, you were
Yeah.
trained to devalue yourself. It's almost like if you value what you're providing, and that's going to be a big mindset shift, right? That you then become an entrepreneur essentially, but with your structure to make it a lot more streamlined. But
Mhm.
it's almost it's and please forgive me if this is insensitive in any way, but do you remember years ago when Tom's shoes first came out? They were made of sustainable material, and it was I think the thing was for every pair that you buy, they give another pair away for free. It's almost
Mhm.
like the clients that can afford it, right? The clients that will really benefit and they really need the support, and they're fortunate enough to have the resources to afford what really your value is, what you're worth. It's almost like they're sponsoring
Mhm. Yeah,
someone
totally.
else, like a la Tom's, right? That
That's a
that could be
hundred
a way to
percent.
look at it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the first step is I think overcoming that limiting belief and charging what
Mm-hmm.
you're worth for the people who can afford it and see it as investment. The second thing is like you can create like so for example, I'm a credentialed special educator in California, so I also made my business what's known as a non-public agency, meaning school districts can contract with me at no cost to the student to have our coaching services for free for their students. So that's like a process where you could
Oh,
become a vendor for
that's
school districts.
huge.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's one option. Another option is I'm a regional center vendor in California. So families with special needs can go to the regional center and the regional center will pay for it through state funding. So you can get creative through this. It takes a little bit of more time to make it accessible like that,
Mm-hmm.
but my vision is that everybody should have access to this. That's why I write a weekly article. I've created free courses. So it's like I think you can create value through your coaching. You can also create like free YouTube videos, free resources.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, you have to remember like unless you have another income source,
Right.
well, you have to make this a job, an
Mm-hmm.
enjoyable job. It's a great job, but it's not something that you're just giving away unless
Right.
you can.
To do the work that you want to do, you have to do the work that you have to do. And that's
Mhm.
that's true literally across every industry. And that that is a great tie-in to Gina's question in the chat. She said, as a former school psychologist, would you recommend reaching out to former districts, or is it a conflict of interest? And I think that vendor option is spot on for that. Reaching out to them if you don't go the vendor route, I'm sure would be a little bit more tap dancing. And Alicia, that is such a great question. Alicia says, can you explain how to do the vendor option? And we have 1 minute remaining on our 30-minute lightning learning session with Sean. So reach out to Sean directly, and I think you two can connect. And I'm sure Sean will share more about his executive function coaching course and program, which through trial and error has been built so beautifully. And I'm, as I said in the very beginning, you have the utmost integrity. You have essentially bushwhacked your way through this fourth door, this fourth path, and you're building something for yourself. And it has, through your own hard work and sweat and determination, you have been able to build something that has also hired more people. You've created more jobs because you were brave enough to say, this role isn't it for me, and I don't want to do what everyone else is doing. This can't be it for me. So I want to applaud you, Sean, for being brave enough
Thank
to
you, Stephanie.
cut your way through this jungle, and you look back and you're like, oh, this makes so much sense. So we are at time, and I'm sorry to cut you off right there, but I want to turn it back over to you really quickly so that you can share any additional resources or a way to contact you, and or your LinkedIn profile link so people can connect with you.
Yeah, so what I'll do is I'll just drop those onto the sheet to make it easy for anybody. So I would just say pop that sheet
Okay.
open. And then, yeah, if you just Google Executive Function Coaching Academy or find me on LinkedIn, I try to comment on as much stuff as well. So you can probably find me on the comments there. And I just want to give you a huge shout out for what you're doing, Steph. I really admire and appreciate what you're creating for transitioning educators, helping them see their value and opportunities out there. And I'm grateful that you gave me the opportunity here to share my story with your audience.
Well, we'll definitely do this again because this is an outstanding message that I think not enough people are sharing. So everyone who joined us, thank you, thank you, thank you. Go forth, be well, and definitely reach out to Sean. This is an outstanding pathway for you.